In 1066 AD, the Duchy of Toulouse was under new management. While bitter, violent conflicts spread across the British Isles, it was clear that soon France too would become a divided nation. Historians have long debated what truly happened in Toulouse, but now, with modern technology, we can bring you the truth.
It might look pleasant, but this landscape has a dark and devious past.
The Duke of Toulouse was only 19, but his mind was older. If you had to define him in 3 words, those 3 words would be lustful, impatient, and brave, which is why he bravely and impatiently lusted for more land. His lifelong rival, the Duke of Aquitaine, commanded a far larger kingdom, and he always just stood around looking shifty. It was kind of his thing. Since it was 1066 and Guilhem didn't have any children to marry off, he knew there was only one way he was getting any more land. By killing people, not people who own the land, but people who work for the people who own the land, thus completing the transaction through which land is reassigned. Guilhem was also smart enough to know that a wife would come in handy as well. As luck would have it, Prince Robert the Old had a daughter that he was willing to marry off. Constance was just, gregarious, and chaste, all around a terrible match for Guilhem. The arrangements were made, and the two were wed. After the wedding, Guilhem's bishop took him to one side and made a formal introduction.
Hello, lovely Guilhem. Welcome to Life as a Duke. I am Leif from the Bishop Council, and this is a formal warning to ask you to be a bit more pious.
Unfortunately, this didn't quite pan out. The day after the wedding, Guilhem was startled to discover that he had been elected the leader of a faction that he had never consciously joined. Some of the other dukes of France were conspiring to put Princess Adele, no relation, on the throne. Nobody's quite sure how Guilhem ended up in charge, we may never know. As far as we can tell, Guilhem actually quite liked the king. Anyway, some minor duke or count or whatever had waged war against the king because apparently he was a tyrant. Guilhem, knowing an easy win when he saw one, decided to help the king. Maybe he would gain a little bit of favour in the process. As the armies of Toulouse marched north, Guilhem took his brother aside and explained that he was relieving him of command. The Duke of Toulouse explained that it would really help sell the narrative if he himself were leading the army. Unfortunately, it took the Duke so long to get there that by the time his armies arrived, the war was essentially over. While on the road, Guilhem learned that his wife Constance was pregnant, and he was immediately racked with doubt. The Duke confronted his wife and demanded to know who she was cheating on him with. When she said she hadn't been cheating, he told her that he didn't believe her. Then he got his spymaster to look into it, and when his spymaster confirmed that Constance had in fact been faithful, the Duke essentially invented gaslighting and told his wife that he'd believed her the whole time. At no point going into this documentary did I describe the Duke of Toulouse as a nice man. When the Duke's first son was born, he named him after an exotic cheese that he'd tried once, as is the fashion in France to this day. Guilhem decided to turn his attention to a nearby province owned by a man named Robert. Expecting many battles to come, the Duke decided to hire a physician. He was presented with 2 candidates, one very experienced but also an alcoholic, and another less experienced but not an alcoholic. Embracing his inner sense of fun, Guilhem hired the drunk. Dark was the day of the 29th of July 1068 when a local mystic forced themselves into the Duke's castle. The mystic informed the Duke that he was living on borrowed time, a husk floating through a cursed life. The Duke said whatever the French word is for be gone, and the mystic was dragged away, wailing. On the plus side, the Duke's relationship with his bishop was improving.
You know what, Guilhem? You're alright. You go and be as lusty as you like. I'm sure God won't mind.
Having won over the clergy, the Duke redirected his efforts towards making the king like and respect him. As a token of goodwill, he abandoned the faction trying to put Adele on the throne. At least she could say that she'd tried. On the 15th of December 1068, just 10 days before Christmas, the Duke was riding his horse when it bolted, sending him flying into the ground. As he plummeted, he was heard to scream, "'Tis just as the omens spake, I swear it." As Guilhem lay face down in the dirt, a hefty scar lying across his face, his physician staggered over.
"Not to worry, love. We all fall off the horse eventually."
There was something about her words that resonated deeply with the Duke, and when he got to his feet, he noticed the scar had completely vanished. The Duke skipped home with a spring in his step, only to discover his brother Raymond was waiting for him. Raymond had heard how upset his brother was by the omen.
I understand that you have received some upsetting news recently. I trust that this rug will help you. Oh, and try not to trip on it. We wouldn't want that now, would we? Oh no, we wouldn't want that.
Say what you will about Raymond and how his life went downhill from this moment, but it was very nice of him to buy his brother a rug. As Duke Gwilym walked back and forth over his new present, he received some troubling news from his spymaster. Someone was plotting to kill him. Ever the optimist, the Duke declared that life must go on, and he quickly appointed Raymond to be his new marshal. As the famous Toulouse saying goes, give a man a rug, you'll probably be promoted to be his marshal. Noticing that his wife hadn't given birth in several years, the Duke decided to seduce her. He did so with a twinkle in his eye, for the king had just appointed him Chancellor of France. Maybe it was finally time to put the omen behind him. In his first attempt to seduce his wife, the Duke gave her brother loads of money. Not only did this not work, it also bankrupted the Duchy of Toulouse. Gwilym readjusted his approach and instead decided to give Constance's half-brother a favour. Constance was apparently a fan of vague, meaningless gestures, and she found this move particularly seductive. And so it was that the Duke of Toulouse managed to seduce his own wife. Even greater news followed as the Duke's bishop barged in. He announced with glee that he had fabricated a claim on the neighbouring duchy, and all he needed was just a little bit of money. The Duke had to have a very awkward conversation with the bishop in which he told him that there was no money, he'd given it all to his wife's brother. Since Stilton was now old enough to start asking questions, the Duke seized the opportunity to impart some timeless wisdom. My son, there are 2 things you must know. The first of which is don't be a snitch. And father, what is the second thing? The second thing is don't interrupt when I'm talking, Stilton. Cringe. A few days after this heated moment with his son, the Duke fell mysteriously ill. He insisted that his physician throw caution to the wind and try something reckless. As she rubbed a salve made of other people's scabs all over his bare skin, the Duke writhed in pain.
Hold still now. You're throwing your humours all a-kilter.
While the initial treatment was a disaster, the Duke did eventually recover, so I guess it worked? The celebrations of the Duke's good health were cut short when he learned that his brother, Raymond, who'd given him the rug, had started a faction against him? On the same day that someone had tried and failed to assassinate the Duke? All of this faction business was very poorly timed. The Duke decided he would quickly make friends with Raymond so that Raymond could help him find whoever it was that was trying to get him assassinated. The Duke's spymaster entered the chamber, his head bowed, unsure how he was ever going to be able to tell Gwilym the truth. Raymond was plotting to kill Duke Gwilym. In truth, Raymond was a bitter, vindictive man. Even his wife looked at him all funny. Duke Gwilym attempted to de-escalate the situation by blackmailing his brother, but it didn't work.
So you think that you can blackmail me? Pathetic. I am the rightful ruler of Toulouse. You will be dead in the ground before I submit to your ridiculous scandal.
Sadly, there was no other option but to separate his brother's body from its head, earning Duke Gwilym the reputation for being a kinslayer. The problem with giving someone like Gwilym a bad reputation is they tend to sort of play into it. All of the land that had previously been held by Raymond was now held by Duke Gwilym's niece. Next in line to claim all that land, after the 3-year-old niece, was Duke Gwilym. 3-year-olds don't tend to have many heirs, and so, having already earned a reputation for being a kinslayer, the Duke didn't really have that much to lose. Little Countess Brigida got lost in the woods one day, and was mauled to death by a wild animal. And so it was that Duke Gwilym inherited 2 castles. The Duke of Toulouse spent the next few years lusting for power and status. He waged war with Duke Robert to the north and seized his territories. threatening to murder the foreign duke's children if he didn't comply. Noticing that King Philippe was looking quite weak and wounded, the Duke of Toulouse joined a faction demanding that the King of France have less power over his dukes. They pressed their demands, ordering the king to grant more power to his vassals. When the reply from Paris came, it bore an unfamiliar seal.
That's right. The king is dead. I, Henry II, am the new king of France. Are you happy now?
It was at this very moment that Duke Wilhelm was presented with an unprecedented choice. Would he cement himself as the new king's right-hand man, or did he have grander schemes for his dynasty? Word quickly spread throughout France that the city of Toulouse was being renamed. Join us in part 2 to learn the full extent of Wilhelm's depravity.
On a day like today, you could almost mistake this beautiful countryside.